like to call this meeting number 26 of the Wildwood School Building Committee to order on the evening of January 29th, 2025. We do have a quorum both combined for those that are joining remotely this evening, as well as those who are here in person at the immediate school. Vivian, you're online. I see. Can you help with our roll call?
Absolutely, Dr. Brand.
Okay, so
Diane,
with that, can we go through roll call, please?
sure. Diane Allen.
Here. Remote.
Greg Bendel. Greg Bendel.
Try talking to Vivian.
Can you hear me? Okay. Greg Bendel. Kate Bissell.
Here.
Dr. Brand.
Here.
Kevin Kyra.
Here.
Michael Camosio.
Here.
Justin Couchet.
Here.
Marianne Galezzo.
Here.
Nick Golden.
Here.
Christine Holleran.
Here.
John Holloway. Dennis Kelly.
Here.
Paul Melorani.
Here.
Craig Miner.
Here.
Christine Murray. Judy O'Connell.
Here.
Christine Pendergast.
Here.
David Ragsdale.
Here.
Paul Ruggiero.
Here.
Stacy Scott. Oh, I'm sorry.
Here.
Paul, were you? Stacy's there. Did I hear Paul?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you. Eric Schlegel
Here.
and Stephen Turner.
Here.
And myself,
Thank you.
we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Vivian. Thank you, everyone. Item number 2 tonight is the approval of minutes from our January 14th, 2025 meeting. Looking for a motion to approve this evening. Thank you. The motion is second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Vivian, I'd like to ask again, please, for roll call for the approval of minutes, January 14th, 2025.
Absolutely. Diane Allen,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Abstain.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
Justin Couchet,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Golden,
Yes.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Melorani,
Yes.
Craig Miner,
Yes.
Christine Murray, Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yes.
Stephen Turner,
Yes.
and myself, yes. Motion carries.
Thanks, Vivian. Thank you, everyone. Item number 3 tonight. Number of items to get an update on for the committee for the design update, and I'll turn it over to Ronnie and Lee.
Thank you, Dr. Brand. For any of those that weren't here for the meeting at 6 o'clock, we talked about the updated site plan. We just had a meeting with the abutters to get some feedback from the abutters, and we will incorporate some of that feedback that we received into the next iteration of the site plan. But on the screen, you're seeing the most recent update to the site plan, and on this site plan we had different elements you'll see, from open area walking paths around the site, and I can kind of point that out a little bit here. So, for example, some of the site and landscape working group, the discussions we talked about were elements we wanted to see around the site. And so, for example, a walking path around the site that could either be used with students or staff can use it during breaks, but being able to walk around the site and explore and have exercise and activity that way. Open field areas in the north west portion of the site, there's one area for open field, and then also as a buffer between the parking and the building itself, there is space as well for an open area and sports fields. Right now, there's 2 field size at U8. We'll continue to talk to the rec department and the athletic department to see if maybe one U10 field is preferred over 2 U8, or maybe they can be overlaid on each other. So trying to understand some versatility on the open space areas. Then you have playground areas, the 3 playgrounds, we've kind of discussed this before. A pre-K playground would be located closer to the pre-K wing. Grades K1 and 2 would be located closer to the K wing, and then grades 3 to 5 would be located opposite the cafeteria. Some of the feedback that was heard, you know, we are going to look at potentially moving the pre-K, the grades 3, 4, and 5 playground closer to the open field area, so that from a visibility and accessibility standpoint during recess, those students could easily utilize both spaces, but also be monitored. We also have, there was a mention of potentially having some gardens that can be used as projects that maybe incorporate the teachers that would take you know, their classes and have these gardens that was part of the curriculum, but then also incorporate potentially seniors in the community to be a part of that process. And then that would allow for when school's not in session, that the gardens are still taken care of. So that was a thought that was also brought up at those meetings. So those are on the site. We also looked at outdoor hardscape and softscape areas, outdoor classroom areas. So the outdoor classrooms, there's one in the courtyard space that's easily accessible from the building, and then potentially we could add one in more of that open space on the northwest portion of the site. So that will also be explored. And then, you know, we'll look at different entry into the building, like for example, at the pre-K entrance, having almost like a sensory garden. You know, that is you know, the first time a lot of these children are separating from their parents to go to school. And so creating that transitional space. So having maybe a little walking path that is more exploratory versus just a sidewalk that leads them directly to the entrance. So that if they are having a harder morning, they have a moment to pause with their you know, caregiver that's dropping them off before entering into the building to just wind down and get ready for their day. And then, you know, that'll also transition inside the building as well to create that kind of transitional space for those earliest learners. And so all of those aspects were discussed. Parking stayed in the same location, the turnarounds and circulation through the site are all aspects that we've all discussed. And, you know, we're just continuing to develop this. And like I said, with the abutters and comments that we heard from them, you know, our next step will be to look at creating a little bit more distance where possible of, say, the roadway from property lines to, you know, just give a little bit more of a separation, but then also consider a lot of these acoustical factors. You know, whether it's an acoustical barrier, looking at screening with trees along the property lines to help with the visibility of what will now be a 3-story building in someone's backyard practically. So, you know, we're going to be continuing to refine the plan throughout the process, but the abutters meeting was that first step. Any questions?
Can we address it right now? But first of all, we'll say to you and the team, you did really. So thank you for running the above meeting. It's good. I would love if we could expand upon playground up there next to 2B, swapping that to 2A, for the context of our viewers at home, and maybe talk about that now. I think that's a great idea. Is now the right time for that, or should we wait till 5C? No? Yeah, I would be in favor of that, for the reasons you described, during the butters meeting. Which for the viewers at home who are not viewing the butters meeting include, pedestrian access for the kids, they don't have to cross that street. Maybe doing a little bit more to mitigate for butters. I think we have a clear mandate to try and mitigate for butters as much as possible, just what you were already saying, but I think we really need to do that, but maybe moving that, they're gonna be one of the ways to do it.
And we may pick up some more real estate, right? Because we did talk about the fact that we're still trying to size those playgrounds for the number of kids. And it does feel a little tight over there. So I think gives us an opportunity to try and expand that a little bit. So we'll explore that.
Thank you.
Do we have any, you said there were, smaller kid-sized soccer fields that are gonna be put there. We have nothing that's gonna be official size.
Correct.
For the town soccer leagues, right?
Correct. The thought there on that, Paul, was we knew that we were going to be developing a large portion of the site because the building was so big. And we had talked about the fact that we're consolidating and potentially taking those other schools offline in the future. Could we try and replace potentially either on the north side or in the future, if something happens on the west side, those consolidated places with extra fields? Because I certainly know there's a soccer field here now that the high school uses. So that's going to be a scheduling question that's already back in the report right now, like how we can do it.
May I follow up on that
Sure.
for me? So regarding those two size fields, there's U-size fields and they are not regulation size, so they can only be used by certain personnel. Has that been reconciled back with the youth programs to know that there's a need for that and that those two fields are used in a big way to justify the existence? I know we have a naming factor, you know, with Mr. Lentini, who's a beloved member of our community, and I fully respect that. And I want to see a field continue. I want to be very clear with his name on it, but I want to also understand that those spaces have been vetted out in utilization and that they will be populated and utilized, and that we're building what makes sense on that space for use.
Yeah, so we're meeting with the recreational department specifically just to like have them understand currently what fields are, and that's where if whether it's, you know, 1 U10 field or preferred or 2 U8s, then that's what we consider. You know, placing there just to make sure that we are meeting the needs of not just the school, but then the community that are going to use it as well as best.
And or that may change in the future, right? Based on this conversation we had tonight where we have a playground over there, and maybe it's, you know, we'll have to reconfigure that a little bit and maybe there's a new field there if that makes sense. And then come back to you and say, here's some options.
Is there an opportunity, I apologize, is there an opportunity to presumably meet as far as south of the, close to Salem Street?
So you'll recall at one point we were showing pickleball courts there that we had been carrying in there for like years and years, and
Just so the pickleball people don't see an open slot for pickleball, there's a field there, and then there's no.
so there is an opportunity potentially to squeeze in a UA field over there. We did talk about, we haven't sized it out there yet. We want to kind of see where things land with what the rec department needs are, because that is a programmatic element. We did discuss with the school, and those fields aren't a programmatic element for the school necessarily, nor were the pickleball courts. It's their removal. So we will kind of run that to ground, those 2 UA fields and placement potentially the 3 to 5 playground over there and see what it's like.
And in addition to the rack, make sure we circulate that athletic director.
Yeah, can I mention something? You mentioned about fields, and I think someone said that they're not really utilized, but I did talk to the athletic director, and he is very concerned with losing the big diamond, as they refer to it, because it is utilized by the JV and the varsity teams as well as the Little League. So we only have 3 big diamonds right now in the town of Wilmington, I believe, at the high school, at the middle school, and at the north, and he's concerned that that's going to be lost. And then my other wondering, I guess, is the Wilmington Sons and Daughters of Italy built the playground for the kids at the North Intermediate as well as the Woburn Street is that going to be replicated and will it be renamed the same? And to follow up on Judy's comment, Frank Lentini Field, will that be dedicated again somewhere?
So I could talk about the playground. We did discuss that, at the site meeting. You know, based on the timeframe of when the project would be completed, to take the existing equipment and move it at that point, would not, the cost to move it and try to.
I don't know about, listen, I don't know about moving it. You know, you may want to get new equipment or whatever, but there is an organization in town that outlaid about $50,000, and I'm wondering, are they just going to be poo-pooed and forgotten about?
Yeah,
That's never the intent. I think we always, you know, one of the things that we try to do is, look at all of those dedications, anything, you know, whether it's a bench that's been donated, you know, relocating it on the site. If there's, a playground that's been named, you know, whether, you know, and that's a decision that happens here is, you know, is the new playground dedicated, you know, to whoever that individual or that group that donated the money. You know, that's a decision that we will make as we're developing, the site and, you know, all of the different elements, you know, where they should be located and, how they should be referred to or named or dedicated to, so.
Yeah. I wanna
And
follow up.
how about the big the baseball field? Is that gone in this design, or is that going to be staying? Because I know the athletic director, you mentioned talking to him. I've talked to him and I know his concern in both the soccer field for the name of Frank Lentini and the baseball field that is used consistently.
To Mr. Kyra's point, we request to the building reuse committee that particularly the Wildwood location being much closer to the high school might be a really appropriate location for a baseball diamond. It's walking distance as opposed to driving or busing.
Yeah, I don't know about that, Mr. Turner. I think the town is in need of cemetery space, and I believe that may be a spot for that, but.
Certainly, there's an option, but to be explored and either Woodward Street or Wildwood. And in those combinations, certainly this is a well-used location. And we will have to make some different decisions, but it could end up being something that actually works better for the high school and youth sports in general. Those are a little bit more centrally located in general.
And also, just so folks are aware, it's not particularly on topic here, but we are, the DPW is going through the process with the engineers, looking at the text on fields that the town acquired and talking about what that's also part of the calculus, trying to make sure we're not having that loss.
So what's the timeline on that? Because I'm just wondering if that timeline coincides with this timeline, we can solve some problems here.
I mean,
It'll actually
It'll happen
be, it'll
before.
happen.
textural difference.
We're already well on it, we're just.
Yes, but I think thinking about that and saying, we know that at a certain point in time in the future, these are gonna come offline. If we've got alternate spaces that we try to bring them online.
That's right.
Around the same time. But I do agree with what Mr. Kyer said about trying to make sure that we're maintaining the dedications.
I think that is an excellent point, and we're kind of keeping a tracking list of monuments, right? There's the Grandian marker out there for the soccer field. We've been given a list of other stuff from the school, so we've kind of got a list of ongoing things of these are kind of permanent, important fixtures that are on the North Kitty site now. That we don't want to lose sight of as we're developing this project. The other two pieces to Mr. Kyra's point, which is excellent, is the loss of those two fields, right? And what is going to happen? They aren't going to be replaced on this site in our current plan because there's not enough room, but what is the future disposition of those? Just so we can answer that question now in the future. So we do have a list of question marks right now that we will try and seek answers to as we get further along in this development.
Oh, sorry.
I just,
maybe this has been done, but I've heard connecting with the rec department and the public record. I would also encourage to definitely make sure that we connect with the youth sports organization. I know that the one I know best willing to do soccer, definitely uses the fields behind this building in Woodward Street, for down to Whitfield and kind of understanding what their needs as well, and what they would be able to different size fields, I think would also be helpful. Thanks, Steve.
Okay, next we wanted to just give you a quick floor plan update on different spaces that we've been reviewing. As we've mentioned before, we have met a couple of times with the district leadership team to get feedback from them on the spaces, making sure that we are accounting for all of the staff that will be located in this building, and then working with them to get a better understanding of how different spaces work. So this is an ongoing process. Right now, we're trying to get the general picture of what needs to happen, and then, as we move further along, we'll develop into further and further detail, but right now we're just making sure we're understanding a lot of the big pieces, and if there's anything that's extremely specific that we need to account for, especially as we're working towards putting together the cost estimates. So on the site, you're seeing the administrative suite, looking at the different spaces, especially, for example, the conference rooms. How many people do those seat? How many are there? What's the logistics of where the staff is, the security. So you'll see here, for example, we have the entry into the vestibule, and then there's a series of doors, but those all remain locked during the day, so that a lot of transactions can happen right at a transaction window. And then depending on the visitor, whether they need to be entering directly into the school, maybe they're here for a conference, so they'll come in and they'll be waiting to have a meeting. And so we're looking at those security measures as we enter in that entry sequence. This is the teacher collaboration space. We worked a little bit more on this with the staff as well. We went from having 6 to 3, I should say 6 smaller ones to 3 equally sized spaces. And now we're looking at how those can be subdivided so that they can potentially be used for, 2 meetings at a time. It can be used for 1 meeting, and then for staff to come in and use it as a workspace. And so, how those spaces would get subdivided, but still have access to as many of the staff as possible when needed. We've been focusing a lot on the pre-K wing just because they're so unique in this building. And so this you'll see is a cut from the model. So when we design the buildings, they're not just flat 2D, they're actually 3-dimensional. So we're able to produce drawings from those, but we're also able to give you these kind of visuals. So in this space, you'll see here, there's the classrooms and then the extended learning area. So we've been talking about the layout in the classroom, having, some seating, but then also thinking about students and that they do circle time. So making sure that we're planning for that space in front of the instructional wall. They have a toilet, there's a small group room, making sure there's sinks and cubbies, and how that procession happens when students come in, they wash their hands, they go to their cubbies, and then maybe they go to their spot. Also talking to the staff about that sequence, if you will, and making sure that the layout of the furniture, because some of this furniture is built in and some of it's movable. So we want to make sure we're accounting for all of the built-in furniture, and then also understanding what we need to keep in mind for the fixed furnishings and equipment budget. And this just gives you an idea of inside one of the classrooms. You have windows, you have casework, which is cabinets that are underneath the windows. You have, taller cabinets for storage of a lot of the manipulatives and materials that pre-K will be using. Near the main entry door, for example, we have cubbies with cabinets above, so that gives additional storage. And then here you'll see that there's a window on either side, but then you have your teaching wall.
Connie, one thing, as we've talked about a lot of security things with planning, different people in town, and then we talk about shades and all that stuff. When you look at the door, there's a side light next to it, which now means you need a shade or something. So if there was something happen, how do you pull that shade down? What type of material is it tinted? Is thought put to that today's security concerns? Or should we be eliminating side lights so that when a door is closed, if something horrible is going on, you can't see into the rooms? So I think now would be the time to talk about that.
Absolutely. So we did start talking about that with the staff. So, it does two things, right? So one is, visibility out into the extended learning areas. So that gives that quick glance. If you hear something, you can kind of just peek out without necessarily having to open the door. Maybe another class is using the space. And then also just, anybody who's walking by, just having that visibility, it keeps it a little bit more transparent. But in the case of, an emergency, yes, there would be a feature to be able to screen that location to prevent viewing in. But also, we also consider sight lines. So from that location, if someone were to look in, a portion of the classroom typically is not visible from there, and that's where students usually would secure themselves until it was safe to exit. So we look at both sides of that.
Thank you.
We also considered extended learning areas, and we developed this even further since the first time we met with the administrative team after receiving some feedback. And so the different colors you see are different zones. So for example, in this blue zone, there is a teaching wall and hard seating, but that also doubles for the one class that can be full day. Because they would be having lunch. And so that would also serve as their lunch space, having sinks very close by so that they can wash their hands prior to lunch. Play area, soft play area, a lot of the equipment is on casters so that it can be moved around as needed and set up. Soft seating for students to be able to sit. This is actually a window that looks out towards the playground, but having a space for students to sit and read, but also having storage underneath. And then, climbing structures that kids can move in and out of to feel more interactive and just expend energy. We also consider the fact that we're in New England and the weather is always ever changing. And so there are days that you can't go outside, but being able to burn that energy, especially for this age group, is so important. And so just having, anything that is in the space is movable so that we can clear it out as quickly as you can and then be able to ride tricycles if they need to inside. So it's a very, very flexible space, and keeping that conversation going. Like I said, it's really for planning and making sure that we're putting in what we need to, whether it's for the plumbing or security measures. So another aspect that we're looking at is the library space. This is the first pass, looking at different zones in the library, classroom spaces for a class to come in and work together, books and shelves for storage of books, soft seating areas for kids to be able to pull a book out and read, and then, some auxiliary spaces, a center. Right now it's showing as a center location for the librarian so that they have visibility around the entire space, and then a workspace as well. So we'll be working with the librarian to find.
First, my apologies to the committee. I failed to introduce the gentleman at the table here, John Miller. My apologies. John is here. He works with SMMA and is here. Julie Duke is joining us remotely, but she's ill tonight. So my apologies, John. I'm not going to be simple. But just for the committee as a whole, just thank you for going through the floor plan design. So I'm not sure if I think I did mention previously, but just want to make sure the committee knows that Ronnie and her team have been just terrific in terms of providing what us, and when I say us, I mean Kate Bissell, Stacy Scott, Herrera, Christine Elliott, our assistant superintendent, Christine Murray, and Ken Lord. We've been partners in the design of these floor plans. There's been a lot of time spent, and I mean that in a very positive way, with back and forth with their effort to try and understand how best to design these spaces. So there's a lot of, Ronnie went through this pretty quickly, but there's been a lot of conversations. And I really, on behalf of the committee, want you to know that we have a great deal of confidence in what's taking shape here is really through the contributions and ideas of our educational leaders in the district. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. No, it's definitely a partnership. You know, we could design a space, but if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for us. So that's the goal here. Any questions before I move into some of the interior imagery?
Just a comment, it's fantastic to see the pre-K space being thought, and obviously, something they have paid lunch for. The variety of ways teachers need to interact with the kids in different spaces in the room. It's fantastic to see it in this way on paper and envision what it can be for the students going forward. Because pre-K and K, it's a really unique sort of learning experience. And having those different spaces is important for reaching the children the right way. So I really appreciate the diagram out of you. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And I'll just add, you know, with the pre-K and K, we are spending a lot of time because they're the youngest learners, but they, you know, when we started this project, a big concern was having all of the students and all of the grades under one roof, but really helping to create identities within the building and small communities is why we're taking the time to really develop, especially these pre-K and K wings. And, you know, we'll just as equally spend time with, you know, the upper grades, but this age is just so unique and meeting their needs within this larger building and making sure they feel like they have this smaller community within the space is really.
I do have one question. The teacher workroom in the administration suite is really, really open. Is that, and I defer to the folks who would actually use it, really realistic to have an administrative wing, an open space like that? Does it need a half wall or a full wall? Maybe not even a doorway, but it looks odd with it being that open. Opposite one of the meeting rooms and all that. So back on slide 9. And maybe that's exactly what's intended, but it seemed like an interesting choice to have it be that open.
So part of it is that there's a secondary door here to enter in. So staff that's coming in, they're gonna come in, they're gonna use the space and they're gonna leave. And then most of the administration is more focused in the front. There's spaces here for staff that they're not necessarily there every day, depending on how many hours they're there. So and then there's a second conference room. So it is open. I think it's just more so that it's not so enclosed. It's also not a room on an exterior wall, so it doesn't have a window. So we're just trying to keep it a little bit more open, but it is secluded and it's further back and it kind of has its own entrance. So.
Is that kind of like counter space in there, where somebody can just land at a spot and do some work and the teacher workroom?
What's going on?
In the teacher, so in this teacher workroom, that's where they can do copying, there's compiling. The administrative staff can actually also use that space as well. It's actually for both. The mail room, the time stamping, postage, you know, a lot of those pieces that happen. It's really, I know it's labeled teacher workroom, but it's really a workroom for the staff.
Thank you.
So now we're going to take you to what we started last time, which we looked at the visioning exercise that we did. This is a compilation of the images that were most preferred of the 3 boards that were shared. You know, a lot of color, natural material, not overwhelming, you know, spaces that had views from the outside. There was wood features, nooks under stairs, you know, so there's all these different elements in a lot of these images that you're seeing on the screen. And so we tried to use those to help inspire how we approach the vision for the inside of the building. So this is just a quick pass, and I'll share this because it wasn't in your packet, so I'll reshare these slides with everybody. But this is just giving you an idea of some of the colors that we're starting to explore for the building, having warmer tones, greens and then blues, and what those could represent. And then using those, whether it's wayfinding, meaning, when a student that may not be able to read, but they know that they are part of the trees and, or I don't know, the roots, the leaves, the whatever, right? But they know that there is something that identifies them to their community. We'll use different aspects as we're going through, and this isn't developed, these are just like starts of a first pass, if you will. We haven't even shown these to the educators yet, so they're seeing this for the first time as well. But also using it as the color scheme, so every wing might have a certain color tone or a certain color that kids can associate with. And this really just helps, especially the younger kids, find their home within the building and feel that they're in a place that they belong to and they associate that. If you ever think of a child, I have a 5-year-old, her favorite color is orange and everything is orange. So we know if it's orange, it's first. And a lot of kids associate certain things with specific colors. And so we'll use those colors to help make a more comfortable environment for the student.
It may be like a primary color of this choice that we use in a stairwell, right? So the student associates, I'm up on the second floor, right? I'm going over to the blue stairwell, right? And it's part of that wayfinding scheme. So we haven't resolved this yet. Obviously, it's our first pass, but you get to see kind of where we're coming from, the thinking and how that perceives that wayfinding is part of the overall kind of planning of the design. And trying to go over it. We haven't figured it all out yet. We certainly have to have lots of conversations with staff. That's kind of where we're going.
Are those the colors that you intend to, at this point, to use to break up the spaces? Is that what you're saying right now?
Potentially. We're just looking at warmer tones and how we're associating them with different
I just think that the
nature
first three of
aspects.
them just like run all together to me. And it's really hard to distinguish between the three of them. And I just hope it's not something that we're not having within a few years. But somebody thought avocado was a smart idea in the 70s. So
Avocado's coming back.
Yeah.
everything's cyclical, right? So maybe this will be good in 30 years, but I'm just saying.
Now, and part of this isn't just color, right? It's material use. So those first two colors, right? One is the color, like warm tones and colors. The other is material, wood colors, natural, right? So they may be in the same kind of color spirit, but those particular two are completely different palettes.
I just would like to see something a little cheery. That's all I'll say.
We'll get there. There's so many tones within
Yeah.
those color families. So as we start to develop them, we'll work on what the complementary colors are of those out.
Sure.
Do you want to be on the color committee?
I'm on too many committees right now.
We're looking for volunteers because not a lot of people want to jump into that one.
Thank you. Did you say it was all one? I'm terrible. If it wasn't for animals, I never would have got dressed.
So we'll continue to develop those as we go. We wanted to look at one of the primary spaces that when folks enter into the building, they're gonna see the cafeteria. And there's a couple of aspects of the cafeteria, so we're just gonna share some imagery that we've started to explore. So this is a view into the cafeteria. The tables are just there as a placeholder, but as you can see, there's large expansive windows connecting this large space to the exterior. This is a time when the kids are in the space at lunchtime, having them have, it can be a very loud space, at times with the number of students that are in there. So there will be a lot of acoustical treatment in this space as well to help control the noise. But also to be able to have that visual connection to nature is also very calming often for students. And so kind of bringing both of those aspects into this one space is really important. Also, exploring different light fixtures that might be in the space to help give it some character. And then you'll see you can have the exterior connection of whether it's the mass timber or the columns and potentially bringing those inside. So we'll be exploring those. And on the far side here, what you're seeing is the lunch, the kitchen area, and then these doors here are potentially, right now are the locations of the quiet rooms off of the cafeteria. So they're very much a part of this space, but they are still off a little bit to give that privacy.
Ronnie, one quick thing. When I taught Westwood, and then I say it when I go to high school, Westwood's, I asked them, like, geez, what we have in the high school, maybe the younger kids use them a lot. For the square footage, I don't know if we use something different, but they didn't seem to think the facility people anyway, because they walk around, that those got used a lot. So, yeah, the quiet rooms out the cap. So when you think of square footage and how valuable space is, if it's something we don't have today, is there a better use for that area? Well, like in the high school, I think if we go back in time, we would have taken out those rooms to make the cap bigger, the whole cap bigger. So, that's one of the things I look at when I see this, because again, I asked that question directly to them. And then I brought up the other day in the meetings, the lighting, it's always cool architectural thing. If you have to replace it or fix it a couple of years down the line, you can't buy that. So I want a lot of thought to go into stuff. What we use, it has to look cool and look like a elementary school, but it has to be something that can be serviceable, replaced, and down the line, because I run into the problems at the middle school now, and with some of the lighting, I can't buy it anymore, and something may not fit in that space anymore, and so how do I replace it? So I just want you guys to keep that in mind when you're designing, because I know it's gonna look cool, but it's also gonna be something that can be serviced down the road.
Dennis, I wrote down light fixtures and LED blinds, things that we want.
Thanks for looking at just for my own knowledge, and I don't mean to spot anybody that's in the room, but I know we have educators here.
You're like dying to talk about it because it's so important.
So, because, you know, I will admit, I've taught at the higher level. I haven't had kids in that age group. Can you talk to the committee about how those spaces would be used off of the cafeteria so that we can get a practical use just to kind of bring it home for us?
Sure, I would say, I think one of the things that immediately comes to mind in terms of the student population that is likely to really benefit from that would be the strides strand that will be housed in this new building, pre-K through 5. That currently is what it varies, but right now I would say that's probably 30 odd students who do integrate with their typical grade level peers for the lunch period, but often struggle to do so in that very loud, very active cafeteria space. Often ending up choosing to sit by themselves at a table because they can't manage the large table of 20 odd students. This would be a great space for them to go with 5 groups and eat and be included and be able to maintain, because the other piece of that is that typically at this point, they can't maintain for the entirety of the lunch period because it becomes too long. So they're forced to leave that space early because it's too much for them. This would be a place where they would be more likely to be able to be successful for the entirety of the 30-minute lunch block.
Perfect, thank you.
We also have an opportunity to meet with the clinical staff that often runs social groups, and that would be another area that I think would take students to do some social skills training again in groups there.
And that happens, I mean, not wild, but I think she's running lunches 4 out of 5 days a week. So that would be at kindergarten level, 4 out of 5 lunches every week. They have one of those 3 rooms would be a lunch, one would be for stride population. We have some behavioral students who would also benefit from that type of setting. And myself, some of us just like quiet spaces. Again, I'm sure it's not used everywhere as much as it could be, but I do think there are certainly students that would utilize spaces that are.
I would say too, I don't want to speak for Mr. Gender or his team, but certainly in the high school, there are those smaller spaces, but I know when I'm in there, it's frequent where if you've been in there at certain times, there's a row of desks and chairs that are outside the gym, that they run the length of the auditorium. And frequently, not every seat's filled, but during lunches, there are often students that are sitting there too, that just want to be up to themselves. Is it essential? Maybe not for all, but certainly it's of interest to a number of students, and so I think I certainly agree with what Dennis around what that actually looks like in its application, but I think with the population we're talking about, just we think like it would certainly get use.
And I would also think add that in our conversation, we've also had many discussions about how those spaces could be used throughout the day by not just student populations during lunch, but other groups. We talked at length about cares and how the use of the cares time is directly offset with the lunch slots, right there to 4 lunch periods at the end of the day. So that would be a great shared space that if students are eating lunch in there, care staff is using it before that and after that. To really, again, maximize those spaces we want.
To that point of maximizing, when I look back at the floor plan now, one of the things we had talked about earlier was the idea that the wall between those spaces might be flexible. Those walls look permanent in the floor plan diagram. Maybe it's just the way they're drawn in now. But to me, one of the ideas was that if you had those walls, potentially there'd be there a portion or a chunk of a staff meeting that could happen in that particular room as well. At different times when the children don't need it for one.
I think that certainly can still be on the table, and certainly what we've heard a lot is there is never enough meeting rooms that you design into these projects. So when you have the opportunity to provide kind of two pieces of that, right, provide some quiet, isolated areas for students that need that during cafeteria time, lunch periods, and then that off period, right, there's a whole another 3 different contained meeting rooms that are physically separated from the larger space that can be used by any of the staff as another opportunity.
Let's gauge the interaction between the indoor and the outdoor space. Is that security class? Is there are we taking into consideration the fact that we're opening up a large portion of there's going to be a very crowded space to the outside?
Yeah, absolutely fair question, right? And we're probably going to get into that level of detail. So what we understand from what we're talking about is security glass. And sometimes we look at, you know, is it ballistic glass or is it 2-hour preventative glass? Regard, I think it's called. And where does that go? And from a budgeting standpoint, in this first pass, we're carrying it on the first floor in a lot of different areas. And, you know, as a final product, you may have school guard over half of this for a mall system, right? So we do have that. So we're budgeting for it right now from a conservative standpoint. And as we continue like another 9 months of this design, have these conversations of understanding where we're going to apply that money from a security standpoint.
Sorry, I need to ask.
No, it's important.
I know other people
I think about it all the time.
So while we're on this, this is floor to ceiling glass. Is there benefits of some of this, the soft panels or glasses that go to the floor, that things we would be interested in?
Again, I think it's a large glass wall, solar gain and all that from heat, and then obviously you want to bring a lot of natural light in. But all those things, the wall itself is got higher R value in wax. So when you look at a big area like that, and you're heating that area, cooling that area, especially with the sun's coming in, you know, you have to manage that design.
If you look at insulating glass, maybe it's not all full visual, some it's, you know, translucent, that has a higher insulation value.
Yeah, as far as U values and all of that, the window systems, right, we're working all that out through the energy models, made some assumptions based on what that is, and it needs to get fine tuned. Whether that's floor to ceiling, we're showing that right now. Obviously, we have to have more conversations. Could we pull that up 4 feet, right, to be able from a maintenance standpoint, and, you know, lawnmowers going by and shooting at rocks? Absolutely fair questions, right? So this is our first pass at trying to understand what the space's potential could be, which is going to lead you to asking these very important questions, right? And we can continue those dialogues, but all of that stuff is certainly on the table. This is kind of our first foray into it to kind of give you guys a taste of what we're thinking.
So the windows are east facing, right? In that wall.
Yes.
So it's morning sun, not afternoon sun in terms of heat gain at that point. So it's a very good point. It would heat in the morning for sure. But at least it's not afternoon sun. So
Big reason that large overhangs out there too is to try and right, we're gonna do solar studies on that, and maybe it's too high and it's gotta come down a little bit more, it's gotta get long, but that is part of that whole kind of solar tuning thing when we're talking about heat gain, where it is on the elevation of exposure side.
I just want to follow up to all this. Where does the space look out to? In other words, where is it? Is it facing the backside where Avalon is? Is it facing which street? So it's back, so it's gonna face out to Ballardvale. So
see up to the butters on that side, I believe.
It's like a flow.
Where that current playground was, if I'm moving, yeah.
So this one's right there.
This is what you're looking at.
So I'm just thinking that, because obviously police do frequent perimeter checks to our public buildings, so that would be easily viewable, like, I'd be concerned, obviously, if it was in the back of the building. To that point, you know, at what point before we lock down, does the police and fire have a look at it to, you know?
They're gonna have several more bites at the apple with us. We've got another meeting, they're gonna be scheduled coming up with them to show them how it's evolved. It's the first time we talked to them.
Have they seen the glass? Did they?
No, so they've only seen the site plan. So our next meeting with them will have the updated site plan. We want to have the abutters meeting, kind of what the feedback is. And then we'll be able to now also share with them a lot of the visuals.
So for me, I'm just speaking as one person, I'm certainly supportive of all that this offers from the light, the benefit, you know, all of that. It just, security just, it feels like a very vulnerable space. So I'm hoping that we kind of something that works well, that everybody feels is a good fit for all the obvious reasons, but safety is one of them. It's not, it wouldn't take much to breach that space, you know, in a big way, and it's immediate access, you know. So.
The other thing with the windows, energy code. It's designed, every one of these designed for heating and cooling. It's designed to heat to 70, only cool to 76. Like at the high school, like 70, right? This design, because of energy code, will not do that. So the more window you have, the more obviously less control you have, or outside interference if you change things. So I just want to put a lot of thought to that, because later on when we talk about the different systems, we're not designing something to cool the building to 7. So more window, the more sun coming in is a great thing for sunlight, but it does change the temperature of the room and change that. So to keep the comfort of the building, maybe the give and take around the windows.
There's gonna be extensive work done on solar tuning, shading, blinds from the inside, blinds on the outside, stop glare. So there's a whole pile of work. You're absolutely right. That needs to go into that process with fine tuning the systems.
So this is a view towards the lobby from the cafeteria. We have that stair that goes from the cafeteria space and it goes up to the library space. Under the stair, we have, right now, we have this opening here. We thought, why not take advantage of it and create a sort of seating area that kids can use. So that's what you're seeing here. Wood beams, if you look up, you have wood above us here. You know, wood beams coming from the outside of the building back into the inside of the building and reflecting what's happening on both sides potentially is something that we'll look at. And then there will be some structural columns inside the space as well, potentially. But ideally, depending on where different walls are and different spaces are, they may be concealed, but you know, it's very important for us, obviously, that since that does have a platform that, you know, we're not blocking any viewing and maintaining all the sight lines, but, you know, potentially using columns also in that space as well.
I really like that one spot on Fenway where that big column is, because that's seeing right next to it.
Two different views of potential art wall options. One is next to that stair. There's this large 2-story space here, creating an art wall on there. Potentially having that wrap around as well. So we'll start looking into those as options. But this is just nods to, you know, what that is a possible location. What that art piece will be, we don't know. Obviously, there's some in this room as well.
There's all sorts of really cool opportunities where we've been able to do these, sometimes as like ceramic and mosaic art walls, where we're getting the students involved, right? And we can kind of, like, I was here in my class, right? So I think there's some really cool opportunities for us to kind of work with you as potential projects with kids, kind of develop that further.
The other location is right above the kitchen, because that is also a large space. I know this shows trees right now, it was just something that was mapped on there, but, you know, this space as well is also, an ideal location to have some sort of mural or art piece as well. We're just highlighting those. And then, you know, we'll be looking at different light fixtures. We'll definitely be talking to Dennis as we pick the. I think she's like, looking up from,
One of each of these.
Yeah.
My attic stock's gonna be huge. One of each, there's gonna be a lot of attic stock.
but definitely in, you know, and as you say, Just, a lot of the ones, especially the ones in the cafeteria, when we visited some of the schools, they had these, you know, in the cafeteria space, being that it doubles as so many like event spaces, performance spaces. Any of the fixtures that we pick will, be able to typically change color, change temperature, you know, being able to really adjust the mood in the space based on, you know, whatever event is happening. And, you know, so we'll be looking at all different options. These are always LED, but, obviously for the maintenance and long-term longevity of the fixtures, we want to find something that complements the vision of the building and what's happening in the space with, the reality of maintaining them. So.
We actually even framed your name and a cup holder on the scissor lips.
And then flooring, we're also considering all the different flooring aspects. Obviously durability is huge. So for our first pass, ideally, we
That's
want
what I was hoping for, right there, right there.
we had Paul's name written on this one. So having terrazzo in all public spaces. So you'll see it here, it's in the cafeteria, in the main entry and around the gymnasium, because that's the most heavily used spaces, in this building. Potentially having it up on the second floor as well, just in that main circulation corridor, and potentially in front of the library, because those are the public spaces. And we anticipate those being the most used throughout the building and also taking the most abuse. And so making sure that, we are selecting materials that are extremely durable, long lasting, probably will never go away. Whoever wanted to change the color, we'll make sure to pick a color that everybody's comfortable with. But really being able to use it, in those spaces that we know are going to be heavily, populated and used for years to come.
And Ronnie, when you talk about flooring, for us, you know, Paul and Glenn and I have had a lot of conversation about the summer use of the high school, right? We still have to strip and wax floors to get ready for the next school year, which now it's time to start looking at floors that I need to clean the building, not strip and wax floors. So all the buildings, whether all the flooring, whether it's in classrooms, whatever, need to be things that, because these schools are going to be used 365 days a year, one way or another. And to take away opportunity for the school department to run programs in the summer, because I need to clean it, I think looking at the flooring like terrazzo and different things, making sure the wash and wax, then I'm just cleaning flat surfaces at desk. I think that's a huge thought that has to be doing this to make sure that the school department has as much time to use it as possible.
Do you like terrazzo?
Yeah.
For walls, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but walls in those public spaces, are we talking about drywall or some kind of?
Glazed block, similar to high school.
Okay, thanks.
We pretty much said look at the high school.
Okay, good. No,
But we are.
because it's durable and,
Responsibility.
yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Being the terrazzo champion also includes being part of that terrazzo color. Just saying, we're gonna need some help with that.
So, another spot that we're looking at is that stair that comes from the library down into the cafeteria, just because that will likely be heavily used. But, you know, it can be fun too, right? So remembering that this is an elementary school, you know, this is one thought, you know, it's a waterfall that's coming down from the library to the, you know, connecting to the cafeteria. So, and maybe lunchtime is the rumbling at the bottom of the waterfall. You know, so, but, you know, just exploring a lot of these different components, but really it's about including the cost of the terrazzo, because obviously it's a more expensive product, making sure that we're accounting for that in the places we really need it.
One follow-up question, if I may, is that with some of the pictures and everything that you have, and like even the glass, which you kind of stepping back, like. If you think about break fix, replacement costs and things like that, because this is gonna be a very used building, it's gonna have wear and tear. A child needing to throw a ball and break one of those beautiful pane glass in the cafeteria. Like, are we thinking about the replacement costs on things too, you know, and that the product that we're using is gonna be available, you know, futuristically, you know what I'm saying? Some of these specialized surfaces, are they gonna be, you know, readily available in stock? And so, you know, it looks great out of the box and it's gonna be great, but like back to some of Dennis's point, like the long term, we have to break fix or replace.
Half of our work product drawings, the other half of our work product is called specifications, right? Picking out the materials, the products. And because we're doing public work, every single thing we pick, we have to find 3 equals, right? So it really puts a high burden on us on our research activities when we're looking for equals. Because when we give them out to bidders, we get one of those 3, we're taking them to their equals. So we've developed, right, working in schools as we do for 30 years. We're not one to stick our necks out too far to be the icebreaker to test out the new product until it's been fully vetted. As a matter of fact, our design team's not allowed to bring in new products to the office until they go through a full vetting schedule for this department. So we take that piece like really seriously. We can never predict what companies will be in business in 30 years if we have to replace it, but we pick the ones that are solid, been around in the school market for a long time. So it's a really valid point. The selection of materials, there's a lot that goes into that. It's managing it against the budget, it's managing against warranties, right? All of that stuff, we're going to be able to come back to you at some point once we have the specs put together for the stuff and say, these are the products that we're thinking, here's the warranty, here's the replacement life cycle analysis, right? We'll have stat sheets and all of that stuff. So all valid points and all stuff that we're thinking about.
And then in the academic wings, right now we're looking at linoleum. I know it's not terrazzo, but we are looking at, you know, sustainable products as well, water-based products that, you know, for cleaning, the need for cleaning and stripping and all of those factors. You know, and one of the things that we look at with the materials that we put into the academic wings, also knowing that they are gonna take on a lot of wear and tear as well, is and I think Dennis, you might have, no, I think you were in the group with me. We were walking around and, you know, when there's scratches in the floor, there's carrots and there's cucumbers, right? If it gets a scratch, it still has the same color underneath, so you don't have to worry about replacing it as frequently. Versus a product that would be considered a cucumber, where you get a scratch in it, it's a different color underneath because the material underneath is different. So we look at the composite of the color of the products as well to make sure that durability and understanding that there is going to be wear and tear and trying to reduce the replacement timeline, you know, or extend the time that it would need to be replaced. So we will be considering that as we're picking the materials as well. For linoleum and a similar type product, we really like it because it allows us to do some fun little features like that you're seeing here, where whether it's wayfinding, whether it's helping to define the circulation path through, say, the extended learning area. We designed extended learning areas, there's definitely spaces and furniture that's happening, but from a fire code standpoint, we need to make sure there's 4 feet and a clear circulation path somewhere along the way. And a lot of times we'll use the flooring to help define for teachers where they can and can't put furniture. So, you know, it works in different ways, but we'll be exploring that as we move further, so.
Does not need to be stripped, waxed, right? If you actually look closely at all
Dennis
this.
doesn't need to hear anything else.
If you look closely at these pictures, right, you'll actually see these are like out of the Rex catalogs, hospitals, right? Sheet linoleum, all because of how durable they are, right? Because they can take something, spill, resist, all of that stuff, renewable material, blah, blah, blah. And I think they'll be, you know, really well suited for the academic wings. Terrazzo, like we said, we're gonna price it for this, right? And then we'll have those conversations once we see what all that looks like. This is where we're starting.
What's the lifespan of these types of products here?
Linoleum.
Yeah.
50 years.
How many?
50, really durable product.
So here you can see classroom wings again. We just wanted to show you some images of visions of the extended learning area. Kate and the other staff here have not seen these yet either, so here we go. Some of the things that we discussed, you know, having different components such as the window seats, being able to sit near the window and have, you know, some students may want to just read during the recess or, you know, extended learning area time, potentially having a Lego wall or some sort of construction wall where they can, you see them a lot at different manipulatives at museums where you can reorganize pipes and make different trails or marble runs. And then having, you know, equipment that they can just move around and make it into whatever they want. So creating spaces for those. Different types of seating, different types of zones for teaching, and then different types of zones for playing. So all of those are getting incorporated. This is just a view towards the north. So if you're entering into the extended learning area, and then this is looking out towards the end of the hallway. You have two classrooms to the right, and then that this white panel is actually a window wall that looks out, and then your egress would be to the left. This is a view looking back towards the entrance into the extended learning area and to the wing. So you'll see the tables and chairs. This is a door that takes you out back into the public area. And here you have sinks for kids who are coming into the area and need to wash their hands, and then you know, different areas of furniture to create zones. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions before we go to the exterior? Lots of slides today, guys, but I'm trying to get through that quickly. We've been doing a lot of work and we want to share. For the exterior, last time we talked about project inspiration and using the different elements of the tree and how that translates. I won't go through that again. So we took your feedback. We have a couple of different versions of what we shared last time. This is the first option. I call this the half tree. I have my own names for these. You can name them what you want, but in here, we try to have, you'll see the metal panels are still part of the project, but you know, we still have that base layer of the brick, which is that foundational piece, the darker brick. And then you have a lighter brick above, and then you have the accent of the metal panels, kind of creating the canopy of the tree. So it's shading, creating that shade and color to the building, and using the metal panels to do that. This is another view. This is the second option. I call this full tree. It has more metal panels on the top, framing each of the piers. So here, for example, you have a brick pier. You think about that as your tree trunk. And then from that, you have the metal panels extending, kind of like the canopy of the tree. Again, you have the red base. That's your kind of roots foundational component. And then we still have the mass timber or some sort of structural element with the canopies, but tying those into the building as you move around for a support for the larger canopies that you see on site. Another perspective. This is option 3. This one is the minimalist tree, Charlie Brown tree, maybe. This one is, you know, a border, if you will, of the metal panels on top as an accent. And so you have your base layer of brick or masonry. Above that, you have masonry as well, and then you have more of a border of the metal panel on the facade. Just another view. So this is just a view of each of those options, just kind of showing the different variations that we're just looking at. Really, it's about materiality. We'll continue to study these as we move forward. And any questions? No, I guess.
I know you know where I stand on, the metal. I like the brick, I like the look of brick. I'm not a big fan of the metal panels and the color. I drove through Bronson the other night as a middle school and a elementary school across the street. Did the classic brick look on mix of brick and didn't have all the color. And I think once you walk in the door, that's where the kids really see all the things, but I think longevity and, you know, a building's classic look. So I'm not a big fan of the beams, as I said, and I'm not a big fan of those metal panels. But that's, again, just my opinion. But it's been pretty consistent.
Yeah, right, with all due respect, I'm just curious like where did that came from? Like what was the thought process behind having that?
So one excellent piece here, and I'll just give you a little color commentary from my takeaway from the last meeting. I took notes, is when we're trying to design the exterior, and I alluded to this a little bit last time, we're trying to tease out kind of what do they like, what do they don't like. I came out of there pretty much 50-50 at our last presentation with, you know, we like color, but we don't like green, but blue might be okay. You know, we like brick, we look more traditional. It was about a 50-50 split. So this time I brought in reinforcements, and we actually brought the designer, Bryce, who has been working with this, and we come back with this feedback and be like, he's like, so how'd you get it? Pretty neutral. So how do we develop this further? So we're doing our best to try and interpret what we hear. And you guys know we're not designing this for any one particular person, just like we're not designing any of the interior spaces for any particular staff, right? Because this is going to outlive most of us. So with that being said, we're trying, as I said, to try and find that line. So Bryce is here with me to your question, Nick. Certainly elaborate on some of your thought process.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, you know, kind of stemming back off the original inspiration based on our concept, where we looked at Wilmington and sort of the Baldwin tree, right? So it's sort of trying to bring it to town. And then also to, you know, seeing how could that develop as far as the building exterior and also potentially translate to the interior, right? So while trying to be, you know, mindful as far as materials go, cost, longevity, you know, you don't want to have to maintain it, right? So I took the design and I used that inspiration of the tree of life, and we looked at it in different, as far as a section of roots, the trunk, and then the overall leaves at the top, right? So I tried to break that down and sort of give a gesture onto the building itself, and not just in one moment. I was looking at the building as a whole, right? So I don't just want it to be one experience coming up to, you know, the main lobby, the main building, the entry. I want to be able to, you know, set at Salem Street or and look out and see, you know, what is that, you know, story, and something that the kids can, you know, really hone into. So, you know, I've used sort of the brick and the dark brick band as the base of your roots, and then transitioning to kind of a lighter color brick, could be glazed, sort of offset as the trunk. Sprinkle in with some accent color of brick, again being kind of mindful of the materials, but using it in a way to help bring the story to life. So, and here we go, here's kind of a breakdown of that. So where we were sectioning off the classroom, where we're identifying sort of the brick, the dark coming up as your trunk, and then the branches coming off with the accent of the blue of the brick. Again, it was green before, looking at it as blue, right? And then as you get towards the higher grades, right, it now kind of becomes your full tree, and where metal panel could. And what's interesting with metal panel too is you can also play with the depths of metal panel. So you can start to get a little bit of, you know, the building's almost coming to life in a sense, not just by the material itself, but how the sun hits it, right?
Texture, shadow line.
Shadow, yeah. And also too, playing with the color. right? So you kind of get to see that sort of story from the base all the way up to the top.
Yeah, I want, first of all, thank you, because it is really cool, for sure. I for myself. Don't see metal and natural together, but I know you're trying to create shadows and create angles and give it some shape. I think boring as it might be, sticking more brick on it. I burn this, but the blue is great. You guys are great to adjust it.
One of the things that I think we sometimes forget about is how much blue is on the middle school. When we can, if you put this next to the middle school and high school, this actually sits in between the two. It's less colorful than my middle school is. And so I think it's interesting. I know, and I believe there's a strong affinity for the way the high school looks. I think we're really happy with how that building came out. And the middle school is 15 years older. So it is a different era. But when we think about the age span of the children and their view of the world, the high school is great in its way, but perhaps having this amount or more of blue, perhaps brick instead of metal, and I defer on the exact material, but in terms of the colorfulness of this, having it be an inviting place for kids, an interesting place for kids to come to at that age. So I'm trying to think about the span of the schools we have, and maybe there's too much blue at the middle school. I don't know, but maybe. And it may be the one that doesn't. And so maybe this one does bridge the gap. You know, it's a step back from middle school, but a step more colorful than the elementary, than the high school. And so it may play in that space in between. So there's a wider space between the two than I remember. So I drive by the middle school and I see the browns more than the blues. But looking at the image right now of it, there's a lot of blue in the blue. Granted, it's mostly window casing. But there's places where the blue goes floor to ceiling, 3 stories up. So it's much more than the sea. And so perhaps like the option 3-1, which is a little bit more muted. These ones, I like the concept of tree. And so it's a really interesting thing. And I'd be curious how much we would get it, or would just like it because it was more colorful. Being old and grumpy, the third one, which is more muted, I'm like, oh, you know, that seems right. But then thinking about the age span, maybe more color is the right approach, perhaps as brick as opposed to metal. Or...
So everyone off what you're saying, if you look at the light poles at the middle school, the window frames of the middle school, that isn't the same blue as it was 20 years ago. So when I look at that, these metal bands, I picture that faded metal that I can't replace. If a light bulb gets hit or damaged, I can't buy it that color, right? So I'm putting a black one in its place. But those are all faded. So that's when I look at this. Brick is going to stay solid and look good forever, well, for years to come. With that metal banding and that coloring, the sun's going to do a number on it at some point, and it starts losing. When you look at the middle school, at some point we're going to talk about replacing all those windows and probably go bronze or some of the color, but you can see it's faded. It's showing its age, and that's my fear with that metal banding is at some point in the next 20 years, it's going to show its age. But if the brick, it's probably not going to show the same way. When we look at the brick part of the building, it still looks solid.
Just one, sorry to take a little bit more time. Is there a way with brick to do texture and depth of thickness of brick as a way to get the goal you're trying to accomplish with the variation without stepping on metal, fading, and those sorts of issues? Is there some sort of medium spot there as well?
Yeah, there's certainly, masonry techniques as far as, bringing that texture. And part of it too is, where I was transitioning the types, right? So, kind of the middle band where it's kind of the beige, it's glazed, right? So you are getting different effect than your bottom sort of traditional rustic, red, New England, right? So absolutely, there's ways of managing the brick in sort of a design. And also to going back to color, again, this was a first pass of sort of, taking the design concept and applying it into the building. So, that could be, expressed in a different way. And part of my job is to go back and if that expression is not clear with you, then it's kind of another round of the table. So that's all up to interpretation.
Mary Ann, it's raised to see.
Yeah, I just kind of want to echo what Dennis is saying. The least amount of maintenance on this building is the best. And I absolutely agree. We're gonna run into problems in a few years down the road here. We start have to replacing metal. My other concern, I know I'm going back a little bit, I'm not a big fan of the floor to ceiling windows. There's gonna be a lot of drawback to that. I'd like to maybe see a design that has half of a wall there or something, but not total floor to ceiling. And I understand what you're saying, you can kind of dim it with blinds or what have you, but I just think I have to look at this more too, and I trust Dennis's opinion on maintenance on these buildings, so I'd like to see the metal definitely gone. And more of a concept of the maybe not the floor to ceiling windows.
Marion, can I ask what do you see as some of the drawbacks on the floor to ceiling windows?
So as Dennis had stated, you know, that the cooling is going to be a big issue. If one of these window panes break, you know, how much is that going to repair? I also see if you have, you know, kids on each side of the windows making faces at each other, dancing around, and the privacy factor. That's my main concern with the windows is the privacy factor. That's a big amount of windows to have people just walking by and looking into that school. If there's some other plan we could come up with just to see it too, and maybe have a few different options for the committee. Thank you.
And Diane and then Paul.
Yeah, I'm going to also say that I have to agree with Dennis's comments. I really don't like the metal, and I think he's making a good point when, you know, you guys are here for a couple of years and then you're gone, and we, the people of the town, are going to live with this project. And to think that, you know, there's going to be a maintenance issue and he can't get the material that was supposed to be there or whatever. So I would say, let's get rid of the metal and make it all stone, make it the brick, and do away with the metal. That's my first comment. My second is, I also agree with what Mary Ann just said with regard to the cafeteria windows. I think floor to ceiling glass, inappropriate. And I think she made a very, very good point about privacy. Not a fan of that. I think that can be cut down in some way for the cafeteria. That's it.
I would like to, I don't know how to use the hand, but I would like to agree with Dennis, Mary Ann, and Diane. Also, I have security concerns with the ceiling to floor with the glass. But I absolutely echo Dennis's perspective on it, as well as Mary Ann and Diane. Thank you.
Paul and then Christine.
I'm struggling with the whole tree concept. It's taken 2 meetings and a lot of explaining for me to kind of see it. I kind of see it here, but I think driving by this building, I don't think people are gonna see it. I'm not a fan of the wood, the beams, it's got this ponderosa kind of look to it. Doesn't know what it wants to be. It wants to be a brick or a block building with some wood, or it just looks like there's a lot going on there. It's busy. I like that you incorporated the blue, but that's not the way I like to see the blue incorporated in the building. It's just speckled everywhere. I get it. I get the whole leaf concept. I know you guys put a lot of time and effort into this. I personally, I can't wrap my head around it.
Christine.
Sorry. I love the designs that were presented tonight, particularly with the warmth that is exhibited from the designs. I personally love the floor to ceiling windows, and I guess I would ask, is there a happy medium with being able to achieve a tint to them to assist with privacy, but yet still allow with the heating, cooling aspect of things? I don't know.
So solar modeling, is that the direct sunlight that's gonna affect the at certain times of day, so that'll be incorporated.
Yes. And to your point, yes, there are definitely options available for us to look at. I think I mentioned that a little bit, maybe we're raising that up 4 feet off the ground, higher, but we'll play around with some looks for that. And, the intent there was for us to capture some views, to capture the scale of the space. And certainly daylighting is a huge opportunity there. So we heard what you said, and we'll take that back and massage this a little bit and come back and see how we do.
One quick question. Do you have, I know we did some building tours. Do you have some 15-year-old buildings that you've done similar sort of window wall in a cafeteria where we would see how that's aged?
Sure.
And maybe that'll be helpful for people. And then maybe there's some combination of that plus maybe some alterations and some different ways to accomplish a couple different goals.
Yeah. If a pane in the curtain wall goes out, it's not a lot different from one of your punch window openings and you break that, right? You're replacing that. So it depends on the, so there's obviously vandalism is something that we think about. And so, yeah, we should be thinking about where that height is. Security is certainly something, and view into that space is something. So all valid stuff that we can take a look at.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm sorry, dude. Can we go back to that?
So, it's been really interesting to hear people's different thoughts on this. I think I'm with sort of team brick. I think that I like the brick is the material, less kind of the metal. I absolutely love the sort of ceiling windows by the cafeteria. Just like the expanse, the vista almost out on the rest of the sort of property there, the natural light. I think it's fantastic. I do absolutely take some of the concerns that have been raised about privacy and safety. I absolutely acknowledge that. But I think that's just kind of like a really standout. What a wonderful. I'm trying to picture kids sitting in that cafeteria like every day, just like having that wonderful, doing all of that light. And I think from the outside in, it's great as well. I am also struggling a little bit with the tree metaphor. I love the connection to education. I think of it in terms of the way that we connect it to like have the kids kind of develop and grow and blossom and so forth. I'm having a harder time connecting it to the building. And I don't know, it's not working for me as much for the building itself as the artistic inspiration. So I just want to throw that out there. But I think you want to consider.
June. I know I've said it in the leadership meeting, which is to weigh in here. I definitely I've shared before, appreciate all the work that's been done. I definitely resonate more with some of the comments that Dennis has made. I am concerned about the wood structure for vandalism. I would be curious to see if there's an option. I understand there's a time and expense to see if you can develop any sort of visual that doesn't include the timbers. As I mentioned, there's one side of the building that, in my opinion, that looks a little bit like building staging, if you will, scaffolding. I understand the tree piece, the comment if you were driving by, would you get the tree metaphor if you were driving by and didn't know that was the intent. I understand the power of color and blue. Struggling with that because it does look speckled. I'm trying to I know I'm being redundant, but I just want to share as a committee member, then I'm leaning more in that direction. The floor to ceiling with the windows. I talked about safety, we talked about the temperature piece. I'm also concerned about kids, if it's a beautiful day, you know, when they're playing around, are they gonna walk into the glass, you know, because it's so transparent and so clear if you do it in the ceiling. I'm sure we're gonna have to be required to put something there so that they know that it's a window. But I've watched that happen in spaces. I've watched it happen at a college where someone literally bounced right off the glass. And they've had to change that. I don't know what has changed since then, but I've watched it happen. So that's a concern. And then the other thing is cleanliness. People put their hands, they see glass. I know people look at your own windows at home and you pitch a window. One, they're very expensive to put in. And two, someone has to clean that, and it has to. It's beautiful glass, it's clean and it's transparent, but it's a sanity thing, a sanitation thing, it's a safety thing, and I just think that, you know, perhaps as adults, people could have that space, but I just don't know in an elementary space. I think it's great in bringing natural light in, but I'm particularly concerned, and I'm curious, how expensive is it to do floor to ceiling of glass versus doing something that's somewhat of a compromise for all the safety concerns and other things? Is it less expensive to do less glass, or is it more expensive to do all this?
We can analyze that, but probably what we're replaced the glass with, right, is brick and the normal wall types that we're putting everywhere else. So yeah, there's a little plus and minus there, but like I said, I think we'll try and take this feedback, right? And we're hearing all sides of the spectrum. Some people like it as expected and some don't. So we'll come back with something that tries to get somewhere in the middle of that. And come back with some cost analysis. We're not gonna have a lot on the cost analysis, right? When everything's getting at this thing, we get our cost estimate back, right? And then we start analyzing some of that stuff. We're going into with some ideas, but I think let's take a look at the next iteration on that, Judy, and see what we can do to try and lend ourselves to what we've heard for some of this feedback.
So continuing on this, but is there a way to add, I don't know, backless seating in that kind of courtyard area that wouldn't disrupt the visual experience from the inside, but would provide a barrier, vehicle barrier, but also provide some sort of public, but not as a direct line of sight from the exterior, without moving.
We've talked on the landscape plan, you know, we talked about a seating wall out in front of that space, right? So because it's also where people are lining up for buses, for pick up and drop off. And certainly from the aspect of people driving through there, the main entrance, right? We're gonna have bollards all over the place, you know, at the front entrance to be able to stop cars from being able to go into that kind of the bus side of the loop versus the parent side of the loop. So we can have safe access for kids to be able to go through the middle of that. So there are different treatments we can do from a security standpoint. There's some landscape treatment that we can do, right? There's going to be plantings and trees and stuff out in front of that. It all looks very harsh right now because we're just looking at these elements. But there's all pieces of that to try and soften that view. And you'll see that we'll come back with this floor to height ceiling with some of those extra added pieces so you can see it in its totality. And you can say, well, maybe that's a little better than you guys came back here with last time versus some of these other options we looked at. And I'm looking at Bryce as he's saying, oh, great.
Okay, I think I'm gonna move us along. There's some time. We still have a number of things to get to tonight. Building systems update is next, and this is there's a bit of information I know about this.
We actually have Matt Woodward from GGD. He is our mechanical engineer for this project on. So you're gonna hear him through the owl. But we have been meeting with the Sustainability Working Group to review some of the building systems. We've talked about, I'll just kind of quickly go through here, and then Matt will jump in as moving along here. But you know, we went through the process of looking at various systems and then comparing them through what's called a life cycle cost analysis. And so that factors in you know, the different utility costs, the maintenance costs, the replacement costs, the construction costs from, you know, when we first are constructing it. And then factoring all of those in, to look at what the savings is over, the 50-year lifespan. And so, you know, part of that is looking at, information that goes into the system. You know, about the system itself, whether it's, impacts such as weather, like I said, the utility rates, the different system characteristics. And then looking at, the usage of that and the maintenance of it over time, and then, analyzing that information to come up with the life cycle costs. Matt, do you want to take over the next few slides? This is your world.
Sure. First of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, hi everyone. Like Ronnie said, my name is Matt Woodward. I'm a mechanical engineer with consulting firm working with Dorn Whittier on the project. So I'll try to do this at a very high level, and then if you know this can get very, very technical if someone desires that, but I think probably beneficial to keep it broad initially, and then we can discuss further. So one thing that was brought up several times when we've met a couple times with the sustainability subcommittee is the conditions within the building. So we're going to present a couple options. That's what was studied in the life cycle analysis. And I just want to be very clear up front that all 4 options that we're going to present have the intent to maintain the same indoor air temperatures and indoor air humidity and air quality. So in heating, that's 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In summertime, you'll have air conditioning, or any time where, you know, not necessarily just summertime, but most likely June, September. We're going to be trying to maintain 75 degrees in all spaces. So that's just a disclaimer right up front. So we can go to the next slide, please.
And Matt, you just want to touch on the fact that why we're using 75 for the cooling, because that was a concern about, right now, that they typically like to have it somewhat cooler as a temperature.
Sure, yeah, I can touch on that. So the 70 and 75 values are effectively universal, at least in Massachusetts now at this point, and that's because of increasingly stringent energy codes. It's basically a construction requirement. So those are the numbers that we pretty much have to use. That's what the system's going to be designed to. So for example, if you have the last day of school, it's 91 degrees outside. That's also the temperature that we designed to. That's stated. Basically, it's a code requirement. We look at local weather data for that. So it deems that 91 degrees is the local temperature for outdoor air that we're going to design the system to operate and maintain 75. So there is a reality that if you're over 91 degrees outside, you will start to stray from that set point. It'll start to get a little warmer. And again, that's a limitation that's placed on us by energy code requirements. Days that are cooler than that, the system could maintain a lower temperature if it was desired to do so. That's sort of a thing that will need to be determined later, how much we want to give end users control over that, because there's energy implications associated with that. I think it's relatively intuitive. I pay for heating oil at my house. I'm a little cost conservative, so I try to keep it low. It's like 65 degrees in my house. I have a young baby. My wife likes to put it up to 75 degrees, and that just costs a lot of money. So that's just reality of how the system is going to kind of work. Are there any questions about that before we continue?
Matt, I got one thing. So what you're stating, right? So in the extreme 2 weeks a year, 3 weeks a year that we get over 90 degrees, which is normal in New England, the system will struggle based on the design, which it has to be designed this way. And then in the winter, on those, we've just gone through single digit temperatures, the system could struggle to keep it 70 because of the energy code and what you need to do for design, correct?
That's correct. So those numbers that you see, if you look at the top blue rectangle there, it says heating 99.6 and cooling 0.4%. So those are what years and years of historical weather data have determined are the dates where, 0.4% of the year you will be below in this area that 2.6 degree Fahrenheit. And energy code effectively says you have to be okay with 0.4% of the hours of the year. You're not going to be able to maintain 70 degrees. They sort of just say, live with it. And the same is true on the cooling side. 0.4% of the year historically is over 91 degrees.
Yeah, that kind of answers my question. I was just gonna say, like, with climate change, by the time we're halfway through this school, I'm sure that number for cooling is gonna rise and we're gonna have a lot more hot days, so it's 91 plus. So is there how adaptable are these systems for the future? Like, we need to make them more powerful at cooling 30 years from now when the number of weeks that we're at 91 plus is higher. Can we do that?
I mean, there is flexibility in the systems. I mean, you're also talking about a 30-year life cycle. A lot of your mechanical equipment is going to be aged out of it's going to need replacement anyway. So you're almost getting into an additional life cycle where an engineer is going to come in and reevaluate that system again at that point. As far as that's kind of why those limitations exist, is that basically if you have a vastly oversized piece of equipment, it's not going to operate as efficiently at the kind of duty cycle parts of the year that are more realistic and more common. So the reason that these numbers are established for us is to prevent people from saying, hey, I want to safeguard against a 300-year storm or something like that, a 300-year condition. They say, well, no, you can't do that. So it's just a limitation that's put on us by code requirements.
Thank you.
We do have a couple more slides. I just want to make sure we get through them and given the time. So I'm just going to kind of keep this moving, and Matt, I'll just keep moving the slides so you can keep going.
Mm-hmm. Did you have something you were going to say, Michael? I see you on the screen. I thought you were putting your hand up.
Real quick to maybe what I can't quite say, but the way it explains it, whatever you put in is going to be there's a load associated with that. The equipment you buy is a little bit bigger. So in both cases, you are going to have a little bit of safety factor in there. It doesn't quite show up there, so might be able to do a little bit more on one day and a little bit more on a cooler day. But by the letter of the law, that's what you're designing. Thank you.
That is true. Okay, so this is basically continuing. I said some of this, that all the set points will be what they are. We've discussed that. All the options that we studied also are fossil-free options. So this is in pursuit of an electrified grid, electrified municipal buildings in Massachusetts. This complies with reimbursement, or is incentivized with reimbursements from the MSBA. So that's ultimately the reasons why we pursued and studied the things that we studied. So this is a lot of word salad going on, but basically it's the 4 options that were looked at. And just at a very high level, I'll say option 1 is an air source VRF system. Effectively, that is a system where we have refrigerant distributed through the building, and it operates with a variety of condensing units on the roof, similar to your home. I guess I'll call it similar to a central air system, sort of. Looks kind of similar. And option 3, and I'm going to jump around a little bit, but you'll understand why in a moment. Option 3 is a system that's a little more similar to, I'll call it a conventional school system. There's hot water and chill water circulating through the building. Again, it does have air conditioning associated with it. There's pumps that circulate that fluid, and just instead of your conventional boiler plant and outdoor chiller, we're packaging those two together, and there's going to be a central roof-mounted heat pump that's going to inject heat into that hot water piping and reject heat from the building via that chilled water during heating cooling modes. So option 1 and 3 are sort of the main breakdown of, or they're the two significantly different systems here. Option 2 and 4 are effectively those same systems with a ground source well field. So some people call it geothermal. So basically, instead of having outdoor condensing units, you're drilling wells into the ground and utilizing the ground temperature, which is relatively regular compared to the exterior temperature of the air, to your advantage, and pulling heat from and rejecting heat to those well fields. Any questions on that at a high level? No. Okay, so these are the results of the life cycle. This has been circulated to the sustainability subcommittee. I'm not certain if it's been circulated to the whole building committee, but basically we look at the anticipated initial costs of the system, anticipated energy costs, both electrical and, well, there's no gas in any of these options, but if there were, we would look at the gas option and that cost. But effectively, it's the return on investment from your utility costs and your maintenance costs and your equipment replacement over a 50-year life cycle compared to the upfront. And that's all in the effort of saying, hey, is this good for our energy profile and energy consumption? But also, very importantly, does this return our investment back to us? Does this make financial dollars and cents? So I know there's a lot on this slide, a lot of numbers. We can take a moment and talk about it, or we can proceed. I don't know, Ronnie, how you want to run that.
We're going to proceed. We'll go through and we'll go to
Okay.
questions on hand.
Sure. So this table is very much the same as the previous one, with a very important difference in that this is accounting for potential federal tax credits that are part of the Inflation Reduction Act for geothermal systems. So if you go back and forth between the slides, you'll see that in the previous slide, options 2 and 4 have like a 20-something year payback. That's because the cost of drilling wells is very, very, very expensive. The IRA has provisions in terms of tax credits that try to incentivize people to look past that cost and basically make customers whole for that. And so this chart tries to account for that. And you'll see that those paybacks are realized with those dollars. So that's the difference between those two slides. So I guess our general life cycle conclusions is effectively, I'm going to even generalize it beyond this slide and maybe more tailor or dovetail into what we've sort of talked about in the subcommittee meetings with the sustainability group, is that it really breaks down to this. Without tax credits, options 1 and 3 are the ones that really make sense. If you want to consider counting on tax credit dollars, that's when options 2 and 4 come more into the fray, and option 4 would become really the highest cost return, the highest energy saver of the options. I have a question from Christine.
What is the lock-in point to be able to get a confirmation that we can take advantage of the federal tax credit?
That is an excellent question, and one that's, I think, very much in flux right now. And I think that's a reality that this group should discuss in terms of their comfortability, because I think many people are probably very uncertain with the direction of the federal government at the moment, and especially in that regard. So I completely understand your question.
Do we know
I
the?
don't have an answer, unfortunately.
Okay.
And the other factor is that incentive is, it's not money you'll see till the project is completely done.
That
So
is
it's
correct.
not something you can factor in now, you upfront that cost, and then, once the project is completed, you would only then be able to, start receiving any of that return.
Eric, I think you have a question?
Yeah, well, one question from the state, which is, you know, I really do appreciate this. You know, that when we started this project, I think, I was optimistic that, you know, with the tax credit group, so something, a good investment long term. At this point in time, I don't, certainly I'm not speaking for the whole group, but I feel like regardless of your politics, relying on that sort of tax credit at this point in time would be foolhardy. And so we either go geothermal because we think it's a better product and we're gonna pay more for it. And if there's a windfall later, we don't count on it at all, or we go with option 3, which appears to be the system that, you know, looks to me like balances a really efficient system with good return on investment without needing to rely on something that I'm not sure is a reality. So that's kind of my thought.
Can I ask a question about that? I'm sorry. Because I agree with the town manager. I too think that the federal picture is way too hard to predict. And frankly, I think it would be really hard to say the words geothermal at town meeting and convince a lot of people of that. They'll be like, we have nice something, what are we talking about here? Even though it's a ground floor heat pump, that's great. I think that if we get some upfront savings by doing the option 3, I think that's the better.
So the only question I would have is in the without tax credit table, there is total life cycle savings of $4 million for option 4, as opposed to 5.6 for option 3. And there is a payback as well. How do we evaluate the benefits at the bottom of slide 31 against that $1.3 million delta? How is that taken into consideration in the ranking system and the suggestion for option 3 as opposed to 4? Because there is a payback at 21 years, which for a building of this life cycle is less than half the life cycle of the building. Hopefully much less, like a third. So how was that evaluated by the subcommittee and by the recommendations being made?
I'm gonna go back to that slide real quick. So we understand. Thanks to do that.
One more back. Yeah, that one.
So you're looking here, you go across bottom column, it's 18.3 million. You're going over to the 4,041,000 at the end.
Yes.
Savings versus the 5.6.
Yes. I'm just trying to understand that compared to the additional benefits piece at the bottom of slide, whatever that was, 31 is our package. So if we have reduced maintenance, reduced downtime, there's value to Mr. Kelly's team if there's not as much maintenance. So how do we evaluate, 60 years of people's maintenance time? How much salary cost is that? And so that's, is that level of detail in there? And I'm not suggesting necessarily that option 4 is the best choice, but just there might be a little bit more to be understood, and it might be closer than it appears. And I defer to this experts for sure.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna talk about sustainability up later on, but we met today and we all agreed that geothermal is probably not the way to go in the building. For multiple reasons. And on the 2 builds we have right now, we're coming to a lot of either ledge or rock and things like that. So we have swamp and rock and one thing. So when we start talking about filling wells, that's an unknown. And that site cost would be eaten by so you look at that. Then you look at the ability my department has. We have HVAC people that work on options 1 and 3. That's normal maintenance for us. We have people on staff that can do it. We have vendors locally that can do it. So there's a lot more flexibility with those 2 systems. So we'll feel confident working on those and do a lot of it in-house. There will definitely be some things that we'll have to contract outside, similar to high school, but it's definitely something around that knowledge we have. We just hired a new HVAC person that has dealt in VRF and some other newer systems, which is a benefit there. We have someone on staff that also knows all the older systems, so I feel comfortable, 1 and 3. And as we talked today, we wanted to see 1 and 3 side by side and all the pros and cons, so we can make an educated decision. I think most of us are leaning towards option 3, but we just wanted to see them, pros and cons side by side. What the, but I think I could speak for the committee in general, that geothermal is not an option for one thing, so that leaves us 1 and 3. I think displacement air and trying to control a little bit of humidity to keep that 76 feeling cooler. 3 sounded like a better option.
Yeah, I can wait a little bit too, so 3 and 4, so this is the with tax credits, if you look at the middle. The geothermal has almost the same maintenance costs as option 3. For maintenance cost perspective, that's unchanged. I think when I first started this project, I thought that the benefits of, in this case, paying $4 million more upfront would yield more annual electric savings potentially going ground source. I think maybe every year the air source technology is changing and improving. And this year is different than last year, 2 years ago. The projects I'm working on 2 years ago are different than now. And I look at the 229 versus 205 annual electric costs being a lot closer. So when you weigh the unknowns, you consider that we're not very we'd have to pay this up front. We're not very confident presently that we can count on the tax credit. So even if you say you get the tax credit, a lot of these costs are closer. The potential benefit of ground source doesn't seem to be as positive. I think there's an option here. It's flexible. It still provides water. It's their systems that they work on facilities now, and there's a little more certainty with the kinds of systems that they have.
Thank you both very much. It's really helpful.
We have Diane, I saw your hand raised. And
Yeah. Okay, thank you. First of all, I don't think we should count on federal tax credits. I think we should just kind of put that aside. But more importantly, the comment that I really want to make is that the heating and cooling system is one of the most important and expensive components of this project. And I think we really need to get it right. I appreciate the input from the subcommittees that worked on this. My feeling is that we should digest this a little bit more, and we should wait until the next meeting so we have a full committee to review it further and take a vote. I'm trying to digest a lot of this, and I usually listen very carefully what Dennis says, because I know he's the one that really whose shoulders this is gonna fall on. But that's it. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks, Diane. Christine?
Does, excuse me, do any of the options give us more lead points than the others?
Yes.
So- Go ahead, Matt.
Yes, so option 1, and these are projections, of course. So option 1 gets you 11 lead points that we're projecting. Whereas I think I'm generally hearing that really option 1 and 3 are probably the primary targets that I think we're considering. So option 1 will get you 11 lead points in our projection. Option 3 will get you 16 in our projection. So it's worth several more lead points.
For comparison, can you just give us the other two? There's some others.
There, 2 and 4 are also both would be worth 16 lead points.
Okay. Thank you.
1-6, yes.
During our prior meeting, the option 3 outdoor noise highest, can we bury that noise somewhere in the roof at the farthest point away from any of the abutters?
So we did talk extensively about that. We have several different ways to try and mitigate that stuff. Location, acoustical treatments around, which you have experience with working in town.
All right, good. That jumped out at me after,
Yeah, and again, we talked about today is, what is loud, what is quiet? We're talking about changing the decibels, but we didn't spend a lot of time today talking about sound attenuation fences or barriers or vegetation or whatever.
Because this is without that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just to check on this, it is something that as a committee, we have to vote on, but we can do so at the next meeting.
So I think today, today's meeting, we discussed Dennis and I and Craig, we wanted to not vote today. We want to come back the next meeting. I think we want to let everyone have information to digest. We'll come back and make a recommendation next meeting. And that'll give everyone a chance to spend the time to ask questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll do that. I know it's late. In the interest of time, I've been in contact with Julie, just texting our OPM. She said it's fine to skip over item number 4, trying to get us to the end of the meeting. It's the goal here. Unless anyone has any objections with skipping construction manager at risk, it sounds like there's no issue to address that at the February 5th meeting. We really addressed a number of the working group meetings with the exception of public relations. I certainly in the interest of time, and if people are okay with that, we could skip over. But that said, if there's an update that's timely, we could certainly take a moment.
I'm happy to give a quick update. So we met twice since the last meeting. The first time was a day after our meeting. We found out what the date of, all of us heard about the date of our meeting. So that meeting, we talked a little bit about the things we have to do, the plan for September, working backwards, and what we need to do for that day, getting the word out, getting things about childcare, speeding up checking process, things that we maybe can help through the process. We've also heard since then, some community members who are interested in support for the project. So a couple of us had a discussion with them. It seems like they may be starting like a ballot support committee. I don't even know the technical term. And I think we'll share information here. Jessica will share with anybody else if they want content that this group prepares. We'll make sure that they have that for their use. And then lastly, we spoke today about this event, have the abutters, we had a little bit of discussion. I think it's a positive meeting. Hopefully we do meet with them a couple of weeks. And that's something we can talk in the future to work with you. What we do for that is next. Thank you.
I should make it just a quick comment. I know that the town clerk Beth Lawrenson has also talked to the town moderator about the child care issue. So if we want to kind of like get all our ducks in a row.
Yeah, we were just talking things that we're sure we'll work with others and how we have. We just like.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Discussion. So I think the rest of working group updates, we can, again, unless there's any objection, to really address the others. Discussion correspondence, new items, anything new we have not touched on tonight. Okay, committee questions, and number 7. Lots of questions. But really, a lot of great questions. Thank you for your engagement to that end. Public comments. Public comments here tonight. Dr. Greff. Anybody online? I don't believe so. Okay, perfect. With that, item number 9 is a reminder of our next meeting, Wednesday, February the 5th. We will, it's not 2024, it's 2025. We will be back in the large group instruction room. Thank you for your flexibility in meeting here at the North tonight. Again, we obviously did this to build around the abutters meeting. We had a great turnout. Thank you for the comments. I thought it was really terrific discussion to be continued clearly. With all of that said, thank you for your patience in the long meeting tonight. A lot of important information regarding the you and the two for what you presented. Looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Vivian, are you still with us?
Of course I am. Absolutely. Diane Allen,
Yes.
Kate Bissell,
Yes.
Glenn Brand,
Yes.
Kevin Kyra,
Yes.
Michael Camosio,
Yes.
Justin Couchet,
Yes.
Marianne Galezzo,
Yes.
Nick Golden,
Yeah.
Christine Holleran,
Yes.
Dennis Kelly,
Yes.
Paul Millerani,
Yes.
Craig Minor,
Yes.
Christine Murray,
Yes.
Judy O'Connell,
Yes.
Christine Pendergast,
Yes.
David Ragsdale,
Yes.
Paul Ruggiero,
Yes.
Stacy Scott,
Yes.
Eric Schlegel,
Yeah.
Stephen Turner,
Yeah.
and myself, yes. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.